about eco-grief, which is a very important topic. Are we all ready to rock? Okay. My name is Misty McPhee, and I'm a professor here at UW. I teach in the environmental studies program as well as in biology. My area of expertise in my area of research is wildlife biology and endangered species conservation. I work specifically with the whooping crane reintroduction program here in Wisconsin. These are three of the star wildlife students up here. This is Gabby Gens,
Hi, Gabby.
Erin Riley, and the woman at the door is Boone Beck. And back here on our technical side is Jake McNutt. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to just walk you through some of the more common species that you might come across here in the Oshkosh area, or maybe a little further afield, but most of them I think you can even see in town. So we'll start with this group.
Alright, so to start off, we got our cardinals. Now, up on the screen is a male with its bright red plumage, but the females are usually more of a brown color, and they really like thrush, dense woodland areas, so you play that sound.
One thing I like about the cardinal song is it sounds like going down a slide to me. It's like, pew, 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 and so I always think of the slide. I don't know why. Okay.
Up next to it on your right would be the robin. And as some of you may or may not know, it is Wisconsin's state bird. And it's usually used as a signal for spring. Your bottom left would be the turkey, and turkeys, for the females are known as hens, but the adult males are not roosters, they are jakes. And a whole group of them are known as rafters, is known as a rafter. A rafter. And lastly, we have the loon, which is very distinctive call. I think they're more nocturnal, correct? No? All right. If anything, you'll most certainly find them on lakes.
Yes. You ready to? Good. We're gonna go black for a second.
Oops, I might have spoiled it. It's on one.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to play a sound, and then we're going to say, is this a cardinal? Is this a robin? And you're going to raise your hand what you think it is.
And the people who get it right, I have chocolate for you. I have fair trade chocolate. So
And we're not going to ask you why you think that.
Yeah, just
Just raise your hand.
do you care which one I think? Okay. So this one good?
Yeah.
All right, ready?
I guess the audio will get canceled out too.
Just kidding.
Oh, okay. Now try.
We're going to say it. Okay, is that a cardinal?
Oh,
No.
no.
Is that a turkey?
No.
We all know that's not a loon, right? Robin?
Nice.
Yay!
Wow.
Love it.
Okay. I don't know, how do I do this?
Maybe just plain chocolate at the end.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Keep trying and then come get your chocolate at the end. That's brilliant. If there's ever one that like one person gets it, I'll throw you chocolate.
How do you make it that?
Oh,
Chestnut?
Yeah.
And then this one. Next, Shawit. Which one is this? Yeah.
Yay! These are the smartest birders ever.
All right, so your next birds that you can probably see around here, so there's the ring-billed gull, and I didn't know this, I feel like not a lot of people know this. They often spend their winters in Ireland and Great Britain, which makes sense because you think about gulls around, big bodies of water, and Ireland and Britain are in the middle ocean, so. And then over on your right is the Canadian goose. I'm sure we've all witnessed a goose in our life. So they go between the southern part of Canada, and they fly or they migrate all the way down to northern Mexico, which is like a little over 2,000 miles, which is insane if you think about even driving that far is a pain, much less flying. So
They are aggressive jerks.
yeah. Goose. Over here, bottom left, there's a turkey vulture. So I feel like when most people think of vultures, they think of Lion King, see the vultures in movies in Africa. But actually, turkey vultures, since they're in North America, they're not very closely related to vultures in Africa or in Europe, which is interesting. That's good sound. You don't sound very pleasant, nor look it. And then the last one we have is a crow. So I know there's a bit of a distinction between crows and ravens aren't typically around here. You'll see crows around here sometimes. And a good way to tell the difference is that crows are smaller and their tail is shorter and it's more of like a diamond shaped instead of a raven, which was more like a U shaped, and crows have more of a diamond. And then quiz time.
Yeah. I just
Like that? Okay. Okay. I won't do goose, I won't go that easy on you. Maybe? Alright, so who thinks it was a gull? A goose, I hope nobody picks goose. Crow? Turkey vulture?
Yep.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Love it.
You guys are
Well
brilliant.
done.
Then what's this guy?
Easy. Crow.
Yeah.
Nice. Good job.
Okay. To your top left, you have the screech owl.
A lot of times, if you're staying up if you're up really late at night with your lights on, they might appear in your window trying to eat the bugs attracted to the light. Apparently, the raptor rehab gets a lot of calls about them.
Yeah.
It's a pretty eerie sound to hear in the middle of the night if you're not used to it, right?
And then to your right is a mourning dove. I always thought they sounded like owls when I was little, but that's really not.
Yeah, living out in the country, that's a normal sound to hear.
And then to your bottom left, we have the bald eagle. It does not sound how it sounds on TV. That is actually the guy over there. But first, we'll do the bald eagle. Not as intimidating.
Contrast, this is the red-tailed hawk.
You have been told lies.
Even night.
Yeah, the red-tailed hawk is used in movies and TV shows because it has pair chattering like that and telling you, hey, this is you're encroaching on our little world here, back off.
Okay. Alright. Play audio for mystery bird number 3. Everybody think it's an owl? Screech owl? Red-tailed hawk? Mourning dove? Bald eagle? Nice. Now you know the bald eagle.
That's not a bald eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last one. And then what was this?
You haven't changed it yet.
I have not. Good call. You
It's the
don't-
logo.
You don't know.
It's the logo bird.
That one. Morning dove.
All right. Well, first up we got our peregrine falcon, and if you didn't know, the actual word for peregrine means wanderer. And these guys are one of the fastest diving bird species. They've been recorded almost, I think, 200 miles per hour in a full-on dive. And there are,
Sorry.
we do have nesting pairs here on UW Oshkosh campus.
And they're back already. They're, you know.
Yeah, but I can't find falcon cam.
Oh, we can talk about it. It's down right now. Yeah.
It's 15:48.
So some of these have people voices, sorry.
Literally woodpeckers together.
Okay. Don't start.
So on the left, on your right side, we got the woodpeckers. You got the tall one, the hairy, which is probably what most people think of as a woodpecker.
You mean the pileated?
Oh, pileated, sorry. Pileated woodpecker, what we think of. The hairy woodpecker, that guy, it can take them up to 3 to 6 weeks to carve out their nesting cavern into a tree. So we'll start with the pileated. Sounds like a dog barking.
Yeah, so one thing I think about when because the woodpeckers, if we were really to get into this and spend a lot of time on bird calls, the woodpecker group gets very interesting. And the pileated sound in a lot of ways, like the way their rap sounds as well. Just real, I do not have the skills that other people have in this
To
room
make the noise?
to make noises. But like when it's pounding, it goes, I mean, its call mirrors what it sounds like when it's beating on the tree, to me.
Do you want me to do it?
Yes. Try. She can do any bird. If you guys have a bird, ask her. She'll do it. It's pretty awesome.
Sure.
Okay.
Catbird.
Let's get there.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Yeah. And you can even tell the woodpeckers apart by the way they hit the trees. Like once you really get into bird calls, you can tell the difference between the species based on what the sound is they make when they hit the tree and how rapidly they hit the tree.
And our final one is a starling. And for these guys, they're quite beautiful. If you see a huge flock of birds that makes like waves and interesting patterns, it's usually the European starlings. And when they're juveniles, they're more of a darkish brown. Obviously, the one we got pictured up here is adult.
Is that the bird?
Yeah.
It's the mass of all of them coming towards it.
Right? Yeah. It's ominous. Alright.
All right. No, we need test time.
What's wrong? Okay. What is this?
woodpecker.
Nice.
Well done. That's
And who's this?
yeah.
All right, so in this round, we have the gray catbird. So any guesses as to where it got its name from?
Color?
No.
Sound?
The sound, yeah, so it sounds like a cat. Yeah.
And these will nest in the birds around, or in birds, in the trees around campus. And so as you're walking, if you ever walk along the trail on the river or further down the Wawash, you'll hear that sound. And it's not a cat sitting in the bushes waiting to stalk. It's a bird.
And then to the right is a chickadee. I'm sure lots of people have heard of chickadees. And then a little thing about them. So when breeding season begins, their brain actually enlarges to create more sounds to attract more mates. So what were you saying about like the energy use?
So you don't want to put energy into things that you don't need to, especially if you're a small migrating bird, right? You have to, spend your energy very wisely. And so instead of putting all that energy into brain cells you're not using, the brain shrinks. And then when it comes time to need the brain again, you put the energy into it and the brain expands. Just like you, huh? And this one has two calls to it. This is the only bird on here that we put, even though all these birds have multiple sounds. And that's the one that sounds like their name, chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee. It'll happen, I promise. Wandering around neighborhoods in Oshkosh, you'll hear that little two-tone all over the place.
Down here is the house sparrow. So they are a very adaptable species of birds. They have been found to live and breed in 2,000 feet underground coal mines, which there can't be that many resources down there. And they've also found other what's the word? Like a group of them. Oh my gosh.
A flock?
Yes, they found flocks, even living just in like abandoned warehouses too. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Also a very common call.
Can I interrupt with my?
Absolutely.
Does anyone know how starlings and sparrows came to be in the United States? So they're both invasive species. Neither species is native to the U.S., to North America. And the story goes that back in the 1800s, some guy living in New York City decided that Central Park should hold pairs of all species of birds that are mentioned in Shakespeare's plays. And so he introduced pairs. He went over to Europe, got all the birds, came back, introduced pairs of every species in Shakespeare's plays, released them into Central Park. That's how we have starlings and house sparrows.
And then last over here we have dark-eyed junco. And then a little something about them is that their eggs are very colorful. Should have really picture the eggs. They're glossy and they have like a grayish blue tone, but they also have like a lot of spots with brown, purple, and gray. And then this is their call. Bird do we think this is? Alright, anybody for sparrow? Junco? Chickadee? Nice. Love it. Who's
I'll just start with the bottom. The nuthatch is another small bird that you're likely to see in your neighborhood, in the trees in your backyard if you have trees. They're an interesting bird in that they can actually walk sideways up and down the tree, very similar to woodpeckers, and they can walk upside, like they can walk down. So they are a fun bird to watch because their foraging behaviors are really interesting. That barky sound is them, not the other one. Red-winged blackbirds, I'm guessing most people are familiar with red-winged blackbirds. If you ever walk along the river, you're going to see a ton of them. They live in wetland areas. The nuthatch is the only bird on this slide that doesn't live in wetland areas. But the red-winged blackbird will nest in, the males hold territories that multiple females will access, and those males will defend their territories. I don't know if anyone here has ever been attacked by a red-winged blackbird. Wear a bike helmet, that's all I'm saying. So yeah, the red-winged blackbirds will attack to protect their territory. And then the upper right is sandhill crane, which is a very common crane here in Wisconsin. There are 70,000 plus sandhills in the state, and they winter down south and breed up here in the wetland complexes found mostly in central Wisconsin. So especially in the spring, you'll hear that sound, and if you're anything like me, as soon as you hear that sound, you're like, what? You know, where's it? Looking at the sky, and sometimes you can't even see them. Like they're so far up, or their calls are so loud, you'll hear the call and you won't be able to see the birds. But they'll go over in flocks, and you'll see these flocks, these big. Unlike other birds that tuck their legs under when they fly, cranes fly with their legs trailing. And so you'll see the birds flying over with their legs kind of hanging out behind them, and that's likely a sandhill crane. Last but not least.
The whooping crane,
Oh.
Grus americanus.
I know who that is. I know him. They are very loud. So what you're hearing there is a pair of whoopers, and pairs will do two things. They will vocalize in pairs for two reasons. One is to say, hey, again, this is my territory, stay away, I'm protecting chicks or a nest or whatnot. But that's also how they court each other. They have a very specific courtship dance, and they have what's called a unison call, which is when they go together and they kind of duet off of each other. And it's that same very loud, kind of harsh call. But if you ever get to see a unison call in person, it's not loud and harsh in person, it's amazing. Really? So the whooping crane is one of the most endangered birds in North America. There are only about 500 left in the whole world. That's not including captivity. No, so there are about if we want to throw captive birds in, there are about 600 birds in the whole world. And about 100 of them breed here in Wisconsin in the summertime. So.
Want to come pick it?
No, I'll let y'all do it.
The cranes, anybody think it's a crane? Either? No? Nuthatch? Red-winged blackbird? Nice.
Was a river.
Yes.
Yeah, they definitely got harder as we got toward the end.
And which one is that? That's the whooping. The whooping.
Yeah.
squirrel, a gray fox, and a bobcat. Now, gray squirrels, they can have a condition known as melanism, which turns them black. So kind of the reverse of albinism.
What's it called? Albin?
Huh?
We have a black one in our yard.
No, it's melanism.
Melanin.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually how you get black panthers too. They're actually leopards. They're actually leopards and jaguars. That's some melanism.
We want yeah, right, maybe they're a lot smaller than you think. We want to put some lights on maybe actually, because, here, all right, I'll do it. I'm the one with that skill set.
A melon.
Yeah, the gray fox is a little smaller than the red fox, and they lack the black stockings that you'll often see on the red foxes. The bobcats, the main, and between the cats and dogs, the main way you can tell them apart is that the dogs, they still got their claws are not retractable, so you always see their claws on the tracks, while the cat species, they will not have their claws out unless they're actually like attacking something or trying to climb a tree. And then raccoons, they're pretty well known, especially for their hands. That's actually what they're named for. The word raccoon comes from the Posahan word, or known as arukam, if I'm pronouncing that right, which literally translates to animal that scratches with its hands. Now we click. Is that a squirrel? Is it a raccoon? Is that a bobcat? Yeah, it's a bobcat.
Alright, we've got this. So these ones pretty common. White-tailed deer, most people see them. They move a lot towards like November-ish, especially when you think about like deer hunting season. Their tracks are pretty infamous around here. Chipmunk, as you can tell, they're very small as a chipmunk is. They look, if you go back to a squirrel, they look similar. I mean, you can tell some differences. A main difference would be the chipmunks are kind of widespread. The squirrel ones are a little bit narrower. If you can kind of tell between there, these ones, those are kind of narrow, and then chipmunks, they kind of go out wider. And rabbits have this very famous footprint pattern. And then this is a wolf. So as Erin was talking about, you can tell it's a wolf because of it has its claws out.
It's a canine.
Yeah.
But
It's of the
mainly
canine family.
for canines, size is very important. If it's very small, it's probably a gray fox. A little bit bigger would be red fox, and larger. The largest, what you think of a dog print, the usual size for like a larger dog print would be a wolf.
So which track was this? Wolf? No. Chipmunk? Rabbit?
Yep.
Yes. Yep, that's very common pattern.
I don't have any facts or stuff like that. We'll try it if we have time. Top left, we have a opossum.
Not possum.
Yeah, they're actually two different species. There's a possum, which is found in like the Australia and European area, and then the North America we have opossum. But I mean, everyone here just calls him possum.
So you can correct your friends if they call them possum.
Yes, that's right.
And also, it's extremely rare for an opossum to actually have rabies. Extremely rare.
Their body temperature is lower, a little, not completely lower, but slightly lower, and it's enough for the disease. Yeah, it can't sustain itself in that temperature. Human foot. You've all seen
You
it.
might see that
You
around
got
in
one?
spring.
A little concerning that it doesn't have any footwear.
We got black bear.
Yeah, I think those are more common in southern Wisconsin. We
then we got the duck. We thought we'd throw a bird in there.
Also common.
Especially around the waterway area.
Tracks are these.
Oh.
Bear. Opossum.
Yes.
Alright. So,
Okay, so we wanted to wrap up with some pieces of advice as we come into spring. It's very important that people understand how to treat wildlife if they find something. Especially as birds start coming through with spring migration. We might see a lot of birds start hitting windows. I don't know if you guys have experienced that. It's actually a big problem on this campus. We have so many beautiful windows, which is great for people, but really is not so great for the birds. So if you see a bird that gets hit by a window, you see it hit, you see it fall, if it survives, leave it. Like, potentially maybe move it to a covered area where it can revive on its own, but don't try to pick it up and take it inside and nurse it to health kind of thing. Just let it, it's stunned and it'll likely come back. If it actually dies from hitting the window, really leave it. Like, do not handle dead birds. That's number one, don't handle dead birds. Birds can actually carry a lot of diseases. So, I mean, a bird flying around isn't gonna bother you, but you don't wanna pick up a dead bird.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Why can you handle a live bird and not a dead bird?
because once it's dead, the diseases are gonna transfer, like,
Okay, like
more
they
things,
go.
more microbes and stuff start to grow on a dead animal. It'd be like, you're much more likely to hang out with a live person than a dead person. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
I know so much more.
TMI.
I don't know if this is more about him or me.
Yeah.
I do
But
have,
that's a very good question.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Our cat somehow keeps bringing birds in the house. We have had live ones and we've had dead ones.
kills them.
How do we clean them up then?
I would take a plastic bag, pick it up, tie it up, and just put it in the trash.
Okay.
But I will implore,
We cannot figure out how he's getting them.
well, don't let your cat outside.
Well,
That's
he's
what
all fenced in. It's all fenced in. So
That's-
that's why we don't know if there's a hole. We have not found a
Yeah.
hole on our deck yet.
Cats, domestic cats are the largest killer of songbirds in the world.
I mean, he doesn't get out when
4.1.
we like him inside the house.
Yeah.
But we have a screened in deck
Okay.
and we just cannot figure out where he's getting these birds to come.
Well, the
in.
birds could potentially be getting into, if they're getting into a screened-in porch, that the birds could be coming in, if there's even a tiny, tiny hole that you don't even notice in the screen up like at the corner where it attaches or something like that.
I think we
That,
gotta check that
the
corner.
birds can come in there and then your cat has a buffet.
Yes, we've
Yeah.
had what,
Yeah.
unluckily 4, I think we've had.
Yeah.
2 have been alive and 2
Yeah.
have been dead.
Yeah, I would treat it the way I treat
Okay.
a small animal or a
Okay.
small mammal if I find it, is I just take a plastic, pick it up like dog poop, right?
Okay.
Just make sure that you're not touching it with your hands.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, good question though. Also, when we come into spring, you're gonna start seeing baby rabbits or baby birds that have fallen out of a nest or these kinds of things. Again, like there's the old wives' tale that if you touch a baby bird to put it back in its nest, that the smell will keep mom away. No, you can if you know where the nest is, it's easy. You can put the bird back in the nest and it's not gonna be a problem.
Yeah,
And it
birds
keeps
are
throwing it
not,
out though. Ours always do. We have one nest, we tear down the nest all the time, they rebuild right in the same spot. So many of the baby birds, we have put them back,
Yeah.
and they kick them out again.
Well, that.
And then you run over to.
Yeah, I think maybe just like say, parents, yeah.
Pretty soon I'm ready to put like a big net under this
Yeah.
nest, because it's like, stop, I don't like coming home and seeing these baby birds out,
Yeah,
you know?
that's disturbing, yeah.
yeah, birds,
And then
birds generally aren't smell oriented, they're visual oriented. So that's why smell isn't really a big
Oh,
thing for them.
okay.
And that's also why if you have flowers that are meant to be pollinated by birds don't smell, aren't very fragrant. Just a little tidbit of info.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And things like baby rabbits, if you find those, don't start collecting every baby rabbit you find and taking it into your local rehabber. They are so overwhelmed in the spring with things like this, and the baby rabbits will more than likely figure it out. If they don't, this may sound horrible, but it's the circle of life. right? It's kind of how things go. And so as we like the rehabbers have very few resources, i.e. people and money, to do the work they do, and there are, in the spring, just so many animals that end up on their doorstep. Some of them birds or animals that really need attention, and others are just a lot of baby bunnies that people drop off because that's what happens. So just be thoughtful about what you're doing on that front in terms of what your intervention means. Just something to think about. And then we've already talked about cats and birds. Thank you for bringing that up. But I would say cats should stay inside. There's no cat should go outside. Ever, 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 ever. So, but
If anything, make them get them spayed or neutered.
try
Try to control the feral population by not producing more.
But a spayed and neutered cat still kills. I mean, I agree that you should have it spayed and neutered, but it still kills.
You can walk your cat.
So-
Some of them,
Yeah.
some of cats
Yeah,
are super
actually-
energetic, and it's actually whatever. The neighbor that walks their cat. I have a guy in my hometown that walks a raccoon.
Yeah. Okay, that's kind of awesome.
I don't know if that's legal, but he does.
So we'll go to the last slide. But, that's a whooping crane chick. Couldn't help it. But any questions for us? I mean, we've kind of just done a fun little walkthrough of common species that you're going to get around here, but any questions about anything for us? Has anyone seen a whooping crane?
I'm not sure.
You would know.
I would
They're
know.
they're over 5 feet tall and bright white.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, they're big white birds.
Only in the wet.
What do you think is a good resource if you want to start bird watching, if it's something you've not done before?
What a great question. I would say find somebody to start with,
Okay.
and if that somebody has more experience than you, that's even better, because one of the things you learn by doing something, whatever you're learning, whether it's basket weaving or bird watching or bike racing, you're gonna get better by doing it with someone who's better than you are. And so, because that pushes you. So find somebody who can be like, oh yeah, that's a cardinal, I know that off the top of my head. But the resources, I would say, get yourself a really good bird book. My favorite is Sibley's, Sibleys. I only have about 87,000 bird books, but they all have something different to offer, but I like Sibley's the best. And then also you can get CDs. There's a 3 CD set put out by Peterson that's bird calls. It's a phenomenal set. I think they still put it out. I mean, now that CDs aren't CDs, like people don't really buy CDs, I feel like, anymore. But, and mine lives in my car. And so if I'm on a road trip and I'll put that in and I'll practice my warblers, because warblers are really hard, right? And it's a great thing to listen to as I do whatever I'm doing. So I would start with a really good bird book and potentially the bird songs if you want to get into that. You're more likely to ID birds off songs than off sight. I'll tell you that now. Like if you go birding, you're not likely to see a lot of birds. You're likely to hear them all. I can't tell you how many lists from birding trips I have where I didn't see hardly any of the birds that are on my list. And then the other thing would be a good pair of binoculars. So that can range, I mean, good binoculars can get up into thousands of dollars, so depending on what you mean by a good pair of binoculars. But something to see them with is a good thing as well. That's an awesome question. Anyone have other suggestions on that front?
What was that website that we got the calls from? Just if you don't buy CDs.
Oh, that's a good point. Ohio State has the Bohr Laboratory. There are 2 really good labs in the country for vocalizations. One is Ohio State's Bohr Lab, BOHR, I believe, and then the other is the Cornell School of Ornithology. And you can get bird calls from them if there isn't a CD and you just want to go hear what. This is where we got all of the calls for this presentation. Like if you want to hear what a screech owl sounds like, you can go and click on it and you'll get a screech owl. So yeah, the Cornell Lab of O is a phenomenal resource. Oh, more things. Okay, if you get into apps on your phone, I only have I think 4 several bird apps on my phone, but you can, those are the only things, other than my crossword puzzles, bird apps are the only other apps I've paid for. But you can get some really good bird apps, and there's one app called, I think it's called Lark, L-A-R-K, as in the bird, and it helps you learn your birds. So it'll actually show you, kind of like what we did here, it'll show you 4 pictures and play the calls, and then it'll quiz you, and it does it different every time, and it has way more birds in it than what we did. Like, it gets complicated very quickly, but it's a great way to learn too. So, yeah, Labo. Any other?
Are there volunteer opportunities for people that are interested in, I thought like with the crane counting and things like that, are there additional ones beyond that one can do, or is it?
Yeah, so there are a few. There's the breeding bird survey. I'd have to get online and look at the details. I haven't done that in a long time, but the breeding bird survey happens every year. People volunteer. It's called citizen science when people like you go out and do this stuff. There's the Christmas bird count, which happens at Christmas every year. And then there's obviously, as you mentioned, the crane. There's the crane count that happens. When is the crane count? I should know this. I'm pretty sure it's always in spring because I usually have a class field trip the weekend that it happens. So it's usually, I think, in April. I want to say in April. So those are 3 big ones. I can't think of any other off the top of my head, but those are big ones that would require you to kind of know a little bit about what you're doing. The crane count doesn't. Crane count, you go sit in a field and you count how many cranes you see. Yeah, and cranes are cranes. You're not going to mistake it for a duck. But the CBC, the Christmas bird count, and the breeding bird survey, you have to know a little more about what you're doing to collect those data. But all sorts of opportunities like that.
Is there a site or a location or somewhere one can go to find those, or do you just have to hunt and peck for them?
I don't know of a repository to go to. If anything, actually, Cornell Labo might be the best place to go as a repository. I've never gone there to use it as that way, but I sure as heck wouldn't be surprised if they have it, because the Labo is big on citizen science. Like, they have Janice Dickinson is a woman at Labo who really has kind of founded the whole citizen science approach for bird science. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're just stuck there. But I can also, give you my email, and you can email me and ask for more details if you want. Other questions? Awesome. Well, you guys were a really fun audience. Thank you so much. And
Take some chocolate too.
oh yes, come get chocolate. You all deserve chocolate.
Correct answers.
So
If you wanna come up and
dark
do
and
it.
milk.